Matt and JD, we are back. 44th V-Day Chess Olympia 2022, round number 8. Which matchup are we highlighting today, JD?
None of them.
JD, why are you so salty?
There were no games played today, it turns out. This is a rest day, and I don't know why we're recording.
And we're recording early today, so I kind of have this hat hair. It's just a little annoying. Um, you don't mind if I record with my hat on, do you?
Oh, God.
All right, India too. Let's go. So we got Gukesh D against Fabiano Caruana. Let's jump into the game. All right. Fabiano's
I'm
playing white. We
I'm
got
still holding out that there was some sort of PGA error and that the result's wrong.
No, I don't think so. Bishop to b5. I'm actually loving this hat. I'm going to wear it out in public.
Yeah.
G6, castle, bishop g7. Now we see bishop takes c6. A little bit of a rare move, but we've seen this before by Fabi.
A bunch of times. And I mean, we've seen it by Magnus, by Fabi, by like everyone and their dog who's ever played chess has played this before, it turns out. Even though it's not the most common by a pretty long margin. Clearly the grandmasters know something that the rest of us don't.
I think it's more of a positional move, and I believe that's kind of Fabi's strategy going into this game. I don't know if he was factoring in the fact that Gukesh D is a little bit younger, but we're going to see he's definitely going like for the positional outplay in this game. And you know Fabi wants to win with the white pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, queen
And so that
c7.
now a really strange move, which also proves that there's collusion between the India team, which is the only reason they were able to pull this off. Because Prague played this just like a few months ago, so it's clear that Prague, who's the board 3 for India too, has been working together behind the scenes with Gukesh, and they cooked this bad boy up.
Starting with the conspiracy theories. I would too if I were in your shoes.
India's the new Russia.
And now at this point, h3 is played. But in the Prague game against Jobava, Jobava played 7d3. And at first glance, we thought, well, this could just transpose. You know, oftentimes when 7d3 is played, you might play h3 on the next move, or sometimes c3 is played, h3 on the next move. But Fabi had something in mind with this early h3, and it was after d6. He wanted to strike right away in the center with e5, sacrificing a pawn, but trying to create these kind of ugly double pawn sets, and maybe he could blockade them next.
Yeah, I think that he's undermining the mobility of the white center. He has given up the bishop pair, and if he can create some sort of a blockade, like something like this, where we plant a knight on c4 with this pawn on d3, we can restrict the movement of all these pawns, and then the dark square bishops maybe, or not just, or the dark bishops, not necessarily just the dark squared one, are going to struggle to find open long diagonals. And I think that must be the idea that he was going for. And I mean, it's an interesting idea.
I don't see your arrows. Do you have your Explorer open?
Yes.
Okay. I highlighted them as you were saying it. Yeah, so I agree with
Yeah.
you. I think this is the moment for Gukesh D to try to stop that plan by Fabi. And he plays after d3, pawn to c4. And I think this really shows pretty good positional understanding. He's saying, all right, I'm just going to sack this pawn and try to open up, keep these bishops open, not let you lock up the position.
Yeah, and Fabi doesn't even take the pawn. Why doesn't he take the pawn? That seems sort of natural. What tragedy befalls him should he take the pawn?
It looks like pawn to f5 is a very strong move, threatening e4 next. And then you see this dark bishop come to life.
So I think this undermines why he doesn't take the pawn, and he's going to maintain a pawn at d3, even if he's going to take a little bit of structural damage himself, right?
Yeah, just to slow down that e4 threat by black coming up. So knight to c3 was played. And then we have this exchange on d3. And now we see knight to h6 by Gukesh. And this gives the pawn back with a tactic. But I think in his mind, he wanted to just get his king to safety. He's okay with maybe Fabi having a slight lead in development, knowing that he could get his king to safety.
Well, I think though, if we like look back at where the pawns all were, like the center is kind of gobbled up a little bit, and there's not a lot of not a lot of moves. But after this sort of offering of a sacrifice, but just an exchange of pawns and allowing this exchange, the center's pretty wide open, and maybe even d3 becomes a target at some point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think if Gukesh has time to get developed, he could have the advantage here. So to me, Bobby has to be a little bit urgent, try to press this development lead. So there was the tactic, and now bishop to f4, lining up with the queen. So Fabi's playing for the initiative here, right? We see that black king still on e8, knight to a4. There's kind of knight c5 ideas, attack the queen again, f6. And now we see the diagonal open. I like Fabi's position here. What do you think?
I I think we have to like Bobby's position here, but I mean, Gukesh is playing off balance aggressive chess in a lot of his games, and I think that's just exactly what he's done here. I mean, perhaps he knows that Bobby can't be feeling too confident in his own play, and so he's choosing to take this game into pretty muddy waters, and trusting that his good run is going to hold out.
That's really interesting point because a lot of times top players say that they will sort of like target guys that are struggling in an event. And in this case, you're targeting Fabi. Like that's not a thing. You don't target a win against Fabi.
He seems to have done it though. I mean, he is playing. I mean, okay, I have the benefit of the Silicon Monster, but I mean, Black's play is pretty provocative, and White's really doing quite now. So I mean, maybe stop for a second and see if we can figure out why White's doing quite well, but it's not entirely clear why.
So I would say, if we look at the imbalances, Black has three pawn islands. So one, two, and then the third one's over here. White has three pawn islands.
Hmm.
But we got to figure out which of these pawns is weaker. And I think white can get to this pawn more quickly and black can get to d4. So that might be one. Like let's say queen c2, real quick, rook c1. That's probably the first one. King safety, I do think white has a small advantage. Black has opened up their king. Um, and then in terms of the bishop pair, black has the advantage. So I think it's close. But I believe Fabi's slightly in development, and maybe this pawn being a little bit weaker than this one gives Fabi the edge. What do you think?
Uh, I think it's a mess, and I don't know what to make of this position. I don't really like the d4 pawn. It doesn't, other than the fact that it's holding back c5 and d4, which is probably why we played the pawn to d4 in the first place. It seems like it's a little bit shady. I think this queen is very active where it is, and I think that I'm kind of afraid of this. We have a hook here, and it's clear that he's indicated that with this f6 move that he wants to expand on the queen side. He didn't play f6 with the idea of just leaving the pawn on f6.
I agree, and it doesn't seem to be prepping e5 either. I think that would just backfire.
Yeah,
Um,
so I think that I do think that the black has some active play. This bishop, even though it hasn't developed, is already touching h3. We're preparing g4, g5. That's coming with tempo the whole way across. This queen is not doing too shabby where it's at. Can jump in quite quickly. I mean, I see some potential for black and having an active plan. Whereas what is white's active plan? Like you said, I mean, okay. So let's just give rook d8, which is what he played in a game, and say queen c2. Uh,
I'm going to play
what
rook
am I?
d1, knight c5.
Okay, I'll bring the queen over. I thought you told me you were going to go after the c pawn. All right.
We were moving at the same time though. Yeah, rook d1, I think. Guard this pawn. Then I'm going to go knight c5, maybe a3, b4.
Okay, I'm going to play g5 right now.
All right, knight c5.
Well, okay, I'll come to d5. That seems like a nice square.
Yeah, I see what you're doing. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged game. This is very similar to what happens in the game line. But I
Yeah,
think if
almost.
if black doesn't go for this plan of g5, I think white's
Uh-huh.
just better. Uh, White's got
Well,
a
I mean,
positional advantage.
we can see the eval of what we're playing. White is still better, but whose plan's more obvious? I mean, I have a clear plan. I mean, maybe I'm just gonna move my king out of the way, move my bishop out of the way, put a rook on the g file, and I'm just gonna keep shoving.
That's actually a really good point. Who was it that mentioned that during the candidates? Was it Fabiano? I think it was. Who said, a lot of top players will actually look for positions where the engine says the opponent has the advantage if they know their side is easier to play. So it's kind of like that next level, like not just looking at the engine, but can we use the engine to our advantage because we give overconfidence? That could be the case here. It's just easier to play for black. Um, And players might kind of stop their analysis and say, "Oh, this is just better for white," you know.
Yeah, I agree. So as the game went, D4 was played, and he hit with G5 immediately.
So bishop
Same
retreats,
idea.
H5. Now we see rook to E4 by Fabi, and it looks like the plan is let's get the queen out of the way, stack the rooks on the E file, so bringing pressure on this backward pawn by black. But then coming up, I'm curious to see how do you push from there? Because like you said, Gukesh's plan is pretty straightforward. He's going to just keep attacking kingside.
Yeah, and I think this rook E4 was not so much about defending this pawn as it was just stopping G4.
That makes sense. Slow that plan down.
Yeah, so I think that Gukesh's next move makes sense. He's not only adding pressure to this pawn, but this queen helps look at this G4 square, which I think is his main idea.
Oh, sorry, my tape's coming off.
Your tape, your hat is as shaky as the India 2 team is.
Yeah, there's a big downside to this hat. It's fresh writing, and I'm kind of inhaling some marker fumes here, so analysis might go downhill.
Yeah.
Rook f7, rook a to e1.
Rook f7 is such a weird looking move, but I guess it's he just wants to be able to move this knight at some point.
Well, look what he does on the next move, bishop to f8. So the
Always play bishop f8, right?
yeah, and now the rook can swing across to the g file or the h file. That's kind of nice.
It is really nice. And it's interesting that he's waiting to play this queen d5. I mean, that just feels like such a natural square, but he knows he's going to get hit with knight to c3. So I guess he's waiting for this knight to maybe commit itself before playing queen to d5. I mean, this knight's pretty offsides, and it really, I think, has a hard time deciding whether it's wanting to go to c5 or c3.
Yeah, I feel like I would play rook g7 here as black. Like just go ahead with this plan that we were talking about and try to play g4. Queen d5 played in the game, knight c3, and he puts the queen right back on d7. So inviting Fabi to repeat. That's a little bit confusing to me, unless maybe at this point he saw his teammates' games and he was okay with the draw.
I do like that, this pawn is super backwards. I guess it can come forward one square, but it's still going to be a backwards pawn.
Yeah.
But like, and I put everything I have against it, and it doesn't matter because you've got this bishop defending it. I don't need I got the rook. I don't need the. I don't need the knight. I don't need the queen. I don't need the rook. The bishop is doing plenty to defend that pawn all by itself. So you have to wonder, like, we have this Alkine's gun or something people call this the fine cold gun with the queen in the middle. But what is it really doing?
I agree with you. And there is an interesting line here that Fabi could have played. Knight takes g5. After f takes g, queen takes h5. This g pawn is essentially dropping. The strongest move is to bring the knight back. So we get 3 pawns for the piece. And look at black's position. All of these pieces are kind of just bundled up in the back 2 ranks. I think Fabi has a ton of activity here, and this has to be the way to play for the win. Just blow open black's kingside.
I kind of like this idea. I realize it doesn't work right now, but like something like this, and then you bring the bishop out.
Mhm.
I mean, I can see pretty straightforward ways of adding additional pressure to the position. I suppose black is going to bring out the queen though, try to kick us out. Would love to trade queens. So,
Right. But there's a lot of different strategies for white here. Like you could bring this rook to the 3rd rank and swing it over. You could play pawn to g4 as white at some point and try to push the pawns. Black's really not having any quick counterplay, which is a nice thing for white.
I don't know. This is a little bit of counterplay.
Yeah, but you could hold it with the back rook.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But yeah, it's interesting line. I'll grant you that.
Yeah,
But it is
double-edged.
difficult to have found. I mean, like the eval is. I mean, has just been saying that Fabi's slightly better this whole time. Sometimes even a bit more than slightly better. But I I, I didn't see a clear idea for him.
And what ends up happening is a little bit counterintuitive at first, because we talked about like creating this bind on the dark squares with the pawns, maybe controlling c5. But then what happens is it highlights the value of this bishop on f8 because that bishop actually points at these 2 squares. So if the pawns are on a3 and b4, black plays a5 and gets this d pawn moved, all of a sudden black gets a lot of queenside play, and that's what's going to happen here. So b4, e6, boom, we already got a double attack on the b pawn, and now Gukesh is starting to gain the initiative kingside and queenside.
Which is ridiculous. You would not expect that he's gonna suddenly have cause trouble on the queen side. But that's exactly what happens.
I would expect it.
So yeah, e6 gets played, rook to b1, and then queen to d7, stepping out of the way of the rook. And the rook just heads right back. Like, what else am I going to do? It's clear that the Fabi's run out of ideas, and the eval is starting to go the inappropriate, blasphemous, terrible, awful direction. We get to some repetitions, and now this move a3, and boom, there's your queenside initiative. We have this rook, we have this bishop, we have this guy. Like, all of a sudden, I mean, we maybe have something like this coming, and we still have g4 to think about. So like black has so many ideas. It's hard not to like black's position here, even if it looks a little unorthodox.
Yeah, I really like Black's position now. I love the games where you kind of can control the whole board. I'm just gonna flip the board for 1 second so we can look at that. But look at how Black is controlling king side and queen side at the moment. So Fabi's really got to figure out something, and strong players are good at this. Like, how can I make the game dynamic so that my opponent doesn't have all the imbalances in their favor? But what we're gonna see is like Gukesh D handles Fabi's dynamic play really well. So it almost looks like Fabi's just making mistakes because Gukesh responds so well. But real, I like what Fabi's doing going forward. Knight a4, queen back to d8. Now we see trade on a5, b takes, rook takes, and knight to c5. So what Fabi's doing here is he's trying to get his pieces active. He's trying to create some points of weakness on black's side. But look at this move by Gukesh D. So calm. Queen d5.
Yeah, and it's clear it cuts off the connection against this e6 pawn, and is going to free black up to take this guy. I really don't think that Bobby wants to trade queens, even though it's maybe technically the best, because it corrects this pawn. And now we have one solid chain, and
Yeah.
white still has three chains. We have
And
to drop this guy back. And okay, we're after say captures to release the pressure here, D takes, we can just take this pawn. And Bobby still has two chains, and he's down a pawn. This pawn, this pass pawn looks pretty scary to me.
this is a
So trading,
bad endgame for white.
yeah, that's just that you can suffer and lose in 80 moves and with zero chances to ever win, or you can try to keep pieces on the board and perhaps go a little bit nuts and try for more. So rook to d1 happens, attacking this guy. He just brings in. He's going to crash in on the queen side, and Fabi, this has got to be like pure desperation here because like you're losing on all sides of the boards. You just abandon the queen side entirely, and this g4 idea is still possible. And he strikes with g4 himself, and this is like the equivalent of hanging a rook. It turns out.
Yeah, the problem is black actually has a better attack on the king side than white after g4, but again, I agree with what Fabi's doing. This is a position that you're going to lose 9 times out of 10. You got to play g4 and just spice it up and see if you can get your own attack going. HG, HG, knight h6. Now we see bishop to g3 by Fabi, and Gukesh D opens up the center with pawn to e5. What do you think of that move?
I think it makes sense because he still needs to get these bishops to come play. Notice that this bishop hasn't moved yet this game, right?
The c8 bishop?
Yeah,
I
but
don't
it
think
comes
it
with a
has.
threat. It comes with a threat. And yeah, I mean, he's going to blow the center open. I mean, and his pieces are going to be able to fluidly transfer across the board. I mean, notice even though these rooks are both on the queen side, they can very quickly influence the king side as well. So knight takes. This is just a piece sacrifice. I mean, why not? I mean, you can't take this way because I lose the knight, right? What else are you going to do? I mean, you can drop back, I suppose, but
I think he knew e5 was coming and he was planning on the sack the whole time. Like at this point, he has to sack. There's no other
yeah,
option.
true, true. So f takes, rook takes, and yeah, we just grab. We just bleh, what do you? Bleh, this is terrible. You can't even play f3.
And the knight on
Like you're just
c5 is just sitting over there in no man's land. Like, what is he doing? That's a outpost that didn't help at all, and it's if anything, it's a weakness.
yeah. Queen D2 happens, this is bad. I mean, remember when we played G4 and we are gonna attack the Black King?
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's a really simple threat here. H3 mate. And that looks reasonably difficult to do anything about.
Yeah, it does.
So we get a check. And this reminds me of I used to play chess with this buddy of mine at work. And then there was this other guy who wanted to play chess against us. And so he played both of us a few times. And he decided that I was the better chess player because he had managed to at least check my buddy in one of those games. So maybe this is the highlight of the game for Fabi is that he gets to deliver a check.
I just love how your opinion of Fabi is going downhill throughout the game. Rook G7,
Yeah,
Rook
I'm
E1, and here's the
I'm
bishop
frustrated.
H3. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
frustrated.
Well, and so there is one way to defend, and that's to hang everything. So bishop to d6, which allows this rook to defend the important square. But okay, we just take a bishop. Thanks for the free bishop. Rook takes, and now try to defend that square. Well, okay, queen g5, fine. Step out of the way, and now what are you gonna do? I mean, the knight, you bring the knight in. What was possible? I mean, I guess the best is to give another check and just hang the rook for
It's mate in
for
10.
basically, yeah.
Best
Yeah, it
plays mate in
brings
10.
brings the knight in. I mean, what do you have here? I guess you make okay, fine. We have a threat. Look, if we try to do something ridiculous, we can. Oh wait, that even loses.
Yeah.
Doesn't even work. You just sack your queen, and you get mated. That's
So
not
I'm
so different.
curious because you look at that opening, it looked like everything was going well for Fabi. We hit
Yeah.
that point around move 16 where G5 was played. And you look at the eval bar here, it's saying 1.2. So I'm curious if Gukesh and Fabi, and we'll have to look for interviews later, if they knew that Fabi's position was so good according to the computer, and if they knew it, if Gukesh D actually felt like, hey, I'm okay with being down 1.2 or whatever Stockfish says because I have this straightforward plan and I like the style of position. That's what I want to know because if Gukesh D knew kind of what was going on here and how easy it was to play, then it's like a
Mm-hmm.
perfect game by him. But if he didn't realize he was slowly getting worse, 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 and had to fight back, then it's kind of a mixed game. But I mean, still, of course, it's good to beat Bobby.
I think this is collusion, and I think that if Fabi's still trying to recover from all the effort from the candidates and insert another excuse, and then a few more, and I think we'll be on track.
I'll have to get you a Fabi hat for the next round. Maybe he'll pull out a win.
Yeah, this is awful. Can we stop now?
Okay, let's recap the match result. 3-1, India 2 beating US.
No, no, we don't have to do this. It's okay.
Sadwani won on board 4 against
People
Dominguez
can just
Perez.
Google it. Just let people
And 2
Google it.
draws.
Okay.
All right. And we're recording early today, so all the matches aren't done yet. Armenia is still playing India 1, and they're tied 1-1 as of this recording. All right, so
Yeah.
we'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully JD will be in better spirits for the round 9 recap. We're getting close to the end, JD. We'll get to celebrate soon.
Yeah. Whatever.
All right,
India's gonna
thanks.
lose all of the rest of their matches.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.